So the first question is a loaded one where a student had asked that what practice would you recommend to better oneself in the field of research?
Sure. These practice questions are very good. Answer, which is the most important one, would be practice. There's no getting around that. The only way to better yourself in the field of legal writing is to practice legal writing. There is no shortcut, there is no cheat code, there is no crack, right? You need to practice, and it's only through practice that you will become a better writer. And that practice starts from as simple a process as having a notebook and taking notes at every chance you get, right? I've seen actually from my own years as a law school student to over the years, this habit of note taking has disappeared. And it's very unfortunate because it's actually a beautiful habit and it's very, very important to being a good researcher. Some students, in fact, say like, sir, I can't write you an email. I can only send you a message on Instagram or WhatsApp. I'm like, please write me an email. You can't just send me like 5 words and say, tell me how to be a good, or tell me how to get into Yale, which some students like to ask me. I don't know how you can get into Yale. We'll need to talk and figure it out, right? But it all starts with this practice, and this practice can begin with just getting into the habit of taking notes. Taking notes, not just once or twice, taking notes at every meeting you're in, which is a work meeting. Taking notes at every class you're in, right? Because note taking is an art. And that is the first step of being a good writer, including being a good legal writer, right? Connected to this, you practice by writing something, sharing it with someone, asking them for feedback, receiving the feedback, being open to the feedback, right? Not being like, oh, she doesn't understand what I'm saying. My article is perfect. And doing this not just with one person or two people, but doing this as much as you can get, right? So for most of my life in law school and for many years later, I was sort of crazy obsessed with success. And now, as I've become an old man, I'm obsessed with failure, right? Because failure is where the learning happens. Success, very little learning happens, right? So, failing and learning from the failing is the most beautiful thing in the world. And once you realize that, practice becomes so much more welcoming, because you're not afraid to fail because you actually want to learn from the failure, right? And so that should encourage you to write and submit to a journal, write and submit to an editor, write and submit to your friends and say, tell me, give me your honest feedback, right? And then you listen with an open mind. Third and final point, I could make many, many points, but I guess the most important point would be, let me make 2 points, right? One of the most important points would be to actually identify who your favorite writers are and then to read their writing with an eye on their method, right? It's one thing to say that I really love this article. How do you go into the question of why do you really love this article and what is it in the writer's method that makes the article a successful one, right? And I'll just give you this as a piece of homework. Just find any article, newspaper article, law review article, or any legal book, right? That you love, even a case that you really liked, right? And then write down in a single page not more than 5 points about why the method of the writer worked, right? Methodologically, what the writer do that allowed that piece of writing to succeed, right? Once you do that, you begin to discover what are the methods of good writing. And again, the methods of good writing are not fixed, right? Your good writing might not be my good writing. And both of our good writing might not be the good writing that the Supreme Court today wants, right? So One of my favorite, not favorite, let's say, when I was in London in 2011, I'd gone for a conference. I was a very young researcher then. It was a conference on towards a radical approach in intellectual property law at the very lovely London School of Economics, right? And I had gone to present a paper, etc. And a researcher there just blew my mind when she stood up and she presented her paper, which was on research on animals and violence. And her writing was actually in the form of poetry. She had written poetry, not just small 2-3 lines, written pages of poetry surrounded by legal and analytical research. So her form was very different from anything I'd seen, right? So what is good writing itself is uncertain, but you can definitely identify what is good writing for you, or what is good writing for someone whose opinion you really trust, like maybe a teacher or a advisor who tells you this is a good book. Right? Take that book and try and identify what in it is actually allowing the writing to do its job. Right? Is it because of these flourishes? The writer throws in some poetry. Is it because of the depth of the research? That is, every footnote has like beautiful, beautiful insights surfacing. Is it because of the logical structure? It's all arranged perfectly. First A, then B, then C, then D. Is it because of the simplicity of the language? Is it because the topic that has been covered has not been covered by anyone else? Is it because of the honesty of the writer? Right? Andrea Dworkin, a feminist legal philosopher, she writes her most famous work about her experience of being raped. Just think of the pain it must have taken for a scholar to surface her own very visceral experience, bodily experience of being raped, and talk about rape in and through feminist legal methodologies, right? So what makes for good legal writing is not fixed, and there are many ways of doing it. But how you can do that, I've told you 3 things, is by one, practicing, and practicing starting off with taking notes in every class you are, in every meeting you are. 2, in actually sharing with others. 3, in some sense, identifying in your best texts in a very analytical way, what is it that makes for good writing? And the 4th and final point, again, it comes back to the notebook. I don't do this, but so this is what I mean by learning with you. It's always good to have your own learning journey or your writer's journey documented, right? So if I had to write down in my diary, I don't maintain a diary, but I should. When I started writing, I was all about using big words and sounding like I'm very smart, right? And therefore, some of my early articles, no one can understand, including me, because I put in so much nonsense there because I was all about, oh, I'm so smart, I've read so much, right? Now, I'm all about being as clear as possible, even to someone who has no background in law, without losing the complexity of the subject, which is a very different thing. And if you ask me to document my journey as a writer, I've gone through some changes, right? So if you can maintain a journal of your own journey as a writer, and you can extend this to become a journal of your journey as a learner, right? You'll be doing yourself a massive favor, right? That's possibly the most important thing I can tell you today. Keep a journal of your own learning journey and do it diligently. You'll benefit tremendously, and be honest. Right? Maintain this just for yourself.